Late last week, I decided to dive into the terrifying and hostile realm known as my Gmail spam folder when I stumbled across a message from Ubisoft informing me that I had been selected for their Rainbow Six Siege technical test. Apparently, they randomly chose a handful of beta applicants to test out the servers for 3 days before opening their doors to the public, a wise move. I was excited and going to use these 3 days of early access to give an early beta impression when I was slammed with an MDA and forced to sign it in order to participate. So I'm sorry, but I was not able to give you guys an early review of the changes made since the alpha, as well as the current state of the game. But now that the beta is live and the NDA has been lifted, I would love to present to you my early impressions and review of the newest entry in the ever-popular Rainbow Six series, Rainbow Six Siege. Going into this game for the first time, I must admit that I was a little bit apprehensive for several reasons. First and foremost, I had just installed a new graphics card and had no clue if the game would even run, but even more than that, I was worried that the game wouldn't live up to my expectations. I remember watching that E3 demo back in 2014 and thinking, holy shit, this is incredible. I mean, I've always been a huge fan of realistic tactical combat, and that's one of the many reasons I still play a disgusting amount of Rainbow Six Vegas 2 in my spare time. Add in the incredible destruction, and you have a game that will catch my eye, but unfortunately, years and years of vertical slices of over-polished and unrepresentative gameplay have steeled my heart to these kinds of things. And after the alpha was received with mixed reviews, I went into my first match quite unsure of what to expect. Thankfully, what I got from that round, and the dozens and dozens of subsequent rounds I've played since, is a feeling of intense satisfaction. If you became interested in the game for its tactical combat and potentially industry-changing destruction, then you can rest assured that it is here in full force. Nothing feels quite like having your assault team split up and rappel up the sides of an embassy, planting breaching charges on different windows, and then simultaneously blowing the charges, swinging in from the smoking holes to gun down the dazed and confused terrorists. But on the other end of the spectrum, it's just as satisfying to booby-trap your defensive position as the terrorists, blowing the toxic gas canister as the assault forces enter a room, and picking them off one by one as they stumble out, caught on the electrified barbed wire you placed just outside the exit. The combination of tactics and gameplay, and with a level of destruction that frankly still amazes me every time I see it in action, creates some of the most enjoyable gameplay I've had with a first-person shooter in a very long time. However, this is not to say that the game is not flawed or that I don't have concerns about it when it's fully released. The first of these concerns is server stability, with crashes hitting hard and fast, and actually connecting to a game is kind of a roll of the dice and across the fingers. Now, I mean, I get this is understandable. The beta is supposed to be a stress test for the servers to make sure that it can handle the load on launch day, but I couldn't help getting horrible flashbacks to the state of Battlefield 4 servers on launch day, as the netcode and ping spikes constantly saw me shot from behind walls, through riot shields, and while the enemy was facing the entirely opposite direction. Hopefully Ubisoft solves this before launch day, because I would hate to see the launch of this game marred by unresponsive servers. This isn't helped by the fact that teams often drop multiple players, turning an evenly balanced 5x5 match into a painfully unbalanced 5v3 or sometimes even 5v1. Combine this with touchy join-in-progress systems, and the game often collapses into a disarray as squad members disconnect one by one. The gameplay isn't perfect by any means either. Currently, the beta is offering 3 different maps to play: House from the 2014 trailer, Consulate, a small embassy, and Hereford Base, a training compound and the home of the British SAS and location of Rainbow Six team in Tom Clancy's titular novels. It also has 15 unlockable operators with various abilities and weapons, and a terrorist hunt mode designed to appeal to the hardcore Rainbow Six fanbase. It's a decent selection of content for a free beta, to be sure, but it's also what caused doubt to creep into my mind as time passed and I started to get a feel for the mechanics. First off, let's just get this straight. The weapon balance is flawed. And not in a sense of, oh, X gun is more powerful than Y gun, let's all use it. The fact that operators have a small choice of primary and secondary weapons forced upon them eliminates pretty much any chance of that. No, it's that these small and mostly confined close-quarter maps, there's a very little incentive to use anything other than an SMG or a shotgun. The time to kill in this game is blazing fast, and toting around a slow RPM assault rifle designed for mid to long range combat is never as effective as a small and agile SMG that can hit fire down enemies faster than they can bring their bulkier weapons to bear. And shotguns can tear holes through drywall, making them pretty much the meta for maps like House, where nearly everything can be taken apart by bullets and explosions. I do realize that the maps shown are only 3 out of the 11 announced for launch, but I really hope that a handful of these will feature longer range engagements, so that I can use my G36C or LMG without feeling like I'm putting myself at a major disadvantage. Another quibble I have with the game in its current state is the way that your armor and health seem to account for very little when it comes down to it. While I imagine that there is a percentage of damage resistance that increases from light to heavy characters, during firefights I find that light enemies die just as quickly as heavily armored juggernauts did. This is a problem because, from a sheer shooting and maneuvering standpoint, skills disregarded, there's currently very little motivation for choosing a heavy operator over a light one. Light operators are faster, thus making getting in and out of firefights easier and honestly a lot more fun. The physics of character motion in this game are enjoyable, and lightly armored operators breeze through the map, vaulting over obstacles and getting to a critical location in no time, while their SMGs and small shotguns wreak havoc among the enemy team. For the same reason, however, the heavier characters are a lot less fun to play. They're hulking and bulky, slowly plodding their way across the map with their large weapons and heavy armor plating. Theoretically, this should be a fun class to play, a slowly advancing behemoth armed with heavy weapons. However, since armor seems to make so little difference, and large guns are, like I've said, at such a disadvantage, it ended up every time that I played a heavy character, I started wishing that I had chosen a swift one, as I arrived late to battle for the umpteenth time, only to be quickly gunned down by a light operator that snuck up behind me with an SMG. Finally, the most serious concern I have about this title is the one that many fans have been talking about for some time. Will this game be able to keep its player base? I've seen plenty of good games die within months of launch, I'm looking at you Titanfall and Hardline, because they simply couldn't keep people coming back. I attribute this to two reasons, and while I know that there is a myriad of small things all adding up to truly cause this, these two factors have the strongest influence on the attitudes of the player base, in my opinion. First, the lack of customization and progression rewards, something Titanfall was fully guilty of. While not every game needs to be Call of Duty with hundreds and hundreds of unlocks available, it keeps people coming back in order to get that new thing. We've all been guilty of just one more match mentality when trying to get that XP bar fully filled, but just like Titanfall, Siege currently lacks that same motivation. While there may be rank benefits in the full game, at this moment your rank is just a higher number on your XP bar, and the only thing that matters is your renown, a currency that lets you purchase new operators and weapon attachments or skins. However, the actual usage for this renown is pretty slim, purchasing an operator and then upgrading their 2 or 3 weapons with a painfully small amount of upgrades. The standard fare is the 3 types of muzzle attachments, a scope, sometimes a grip, and a laser sight. That's it. When a large amount of your potential player base is coming from Rainbow Six Vegas 2, where the amount of armor customization was off the charts, having a bare-bones weapon upgrade system and no armor customization to speak of will hurt the chances of players playing just one more round to get that upgrade that they've been working for. The second reason is better competitors. While console gamers are a little more restricted in their choice of games, especially in the current generation, PC gamers have the choice of pretty much everything that's ever been made. If a game is bad or even mediocre, the player will often go back to the one that they have more time invested in and thus see as superior. This is why Hardline suffered such a poor retention of PC players, and why there are very few active servers still left. Battlefield players saw Battlefield 4 or even 3 as games that they had sunk much more time into, the superior title, and went back to it after giving Hardline a short try. With a game like Siege, living on the name of a beloved franchise and heavily borrowing elements from Counter-Strike, if the game fails to impress the fans coming over to it right away, the servers of this game could easily become a wasteland as players return to their respective superior titles. Fortunately, Ubisoft is aware of these things and is fighting to combat this. Their president, Yves Guillemot, I'm sorry, I probably butchered that, has been quoted saying that the game's replayability will be the key to the game's success. In an impressive move, the company recently announced that all post-launch DLC maps will be entirely free, saying, "We want players to stay with us for the long term, and have ambitious post-launch plans that we will detail at a later stage." This is certainly a step in the right direction, as games like Insurgency have shown that constantly supporting your game with free new material is a great way to retain an audience. The problem with paid map DLC is that it splits the player base into 2 groups, the people who have and the people who don't have these maps. And since the latter group is usually the larger, the new maps eventually die out and people go back to the core game where the majority of the servers reside. With this decision, Ubisoft has made a large step towards maintaining a solid player base, but only time will tell if it'll be enough. Ultimately, Rainbow Six Siege is a fun but currently flawed game. Thankfully, it seems as though Ubisoft is dedicated to listening to player feedback on this beta, encouraging players to flock to their forums and Reddit to report bugs, make suggestions, and state their opinions on the product in its current state, something I highly encourage you to do. That, combined with their free map support, heart-pounding gameplay, and unparalleled destruction, and the potential to support competitive gaming scene, has me crossing my fingers that this game takes off. The $60 price tag seems a bit steep for a multiplayer-only game, but if Ubisoft can pull off what it hopes to with this, I believe we could be looking at the future of first-person shooters with Rainbow Six Siege.